Kaizo Ironmon is one of the most difficult Pokemon challenges out there. Your opponents are 50% stronger, you can't get any experience on wild Pokemon, you can only use one Pokemon, and if that Pokemon dies, you start over, and you can only use items that you find, which are all random. To a lot of people, Kaizo Ironmon seems like pure luck, but to people like me who have played Kaizo Ironmon a ton, there are many subtle differences between how the good Ironmon players play and how the great Ironmon players play. As someone who beat Kaizo Ironmon around 650 seeds, and who was constantly getting deep runs to the Elite Four in that time, there are a lot of differences between the average Kaizo Ironmon players and the great Kaizo Ironmon players, which I'm going to outline in this video. If you enjoy this, consider subscribing to the channel and liking the video. As an aside, all the tips in this video are going to be referring to Fire Red and Leaf Green, but I'm sure some of the tips will apply elsewhere. The first tip is by far the most important one. Every single decision that you make should be about maximizing your chances to defeat the Elite Four. In Ironmon challenges, the Elite Four is without a doubt the most difficult part of the challenge. You have to beat many high-level Pokemon in a gauntlet of 30 of them, and all of those Pokemon are random. Other than Brock's Gym, or the first fight of the game, it's basically the only time that Pokemon are really going to outlevel you. This means that every decision that you make, you should be asking yourself, how much does this decision impact my ability to beat the Elite Four? Let's take a hypothetical. Suppose that you're in a run where you have a 50% chance of losing your run if you don't use an item. But if you did use that item, that would kill your chance at the Elite Four, give you a 0% shot at beating the Elite Four. Well, then should you use that item to continue the run? No, because then using that item kills your chance of beating the entire run, which is the goal. This is a very extreme example, but it's really a question you should always be asking yourself. It's frequently worth taking a little bit of risk on a decision that gives you a much higher probability of succeeding in the Elite Four. Every run that reaches the Elite Four has a shot of winning the run. And this is because, well, even though some Elite Fours are unwinnable from the start, some are beatable with a lot of different Pokemon, but you don't know which Elite Four you're going to get until you step through that door and start going through the gauntlet that is presented for you. So, while you want to maximize your chances of winning should you get to the Elite Four by entering at a good level, entering with moves that give yourself a chance, and entering with a good amount of items that are going to help you in those fights, sometimes you have to remind yourself that, okay, well, it's not worth a lot of risk just to give myself just a little teeny bit better chance in the Elite Four. You have to sort of balance these things. And there's lots of ways that you can cheese trainers in the Elite Four that have worked to get wins, even on Pokemon that seems like shouldn't really have a chance. Take Riz the Wizard, for example, who won with a fairly bad Swampert that was just able to set up Sharpen in every battle in the Elite Four because Pokemon cooperated, and that increased his attack to where he could sweep everything. Now that I've laid out those two broad concepts of weighing risk and reward, let's start at the beginning. After you get out of the lab with a Pokemon, you should be asking yourself, is there a world where this Pokemon can win the entire run, where it can beat the Elite Four? If the answer is yes, ask yourself how likely that scenario is given where you're at now. If the Pokemon is not a pretty good Pokemon, that is to say, you're not like slam dunk, okay, I should run this, well then you should at least be looking around for pivots or seeing what options exist in the early game to see if anything else exists. In Fire Red and Leaf Green, there is a total of 14 Pokemon that can possibly show up in the bushes before you're required to do a trainer battle. And you only see a single Pokemon in the lab that's good enough to get out, which means it's okay. But sometimes you just get lucky and you get out with a not-so-great Pokemon. And even if you get out with an okay Pokemon, 14 chances at a good Pokemon is greater than 1 chance at a good Pokemon, even if it is good enough to get out of the lab. I would estimate that I pivot for my lab Pokemon at least half the time in Kaizo Ironmon. I pivot a lot, I pivot very aggressively. It can take a considerable amount of time to look through Pokemon in the bushes, but if you find a Pokemon that's really good, like a Kingdra or Milotic, a slam dunk Pokemon, you can just catch it, look at the stats, and then evaluate from there, since there's so many different places to catch Pokemon, right? You have 4 different bushes to catch Pokemon in. Scouting moves is really risky since good moves tend to kill you when you're scouting, so you have to be very careful when you're looking through Pokemon. But if you do get hit by moves, or if you're in combat for a little bit of time, if you get stuck, you can get some really good information, like how strong the Pokemon is that hit you, and you can use a damage calculator to calculate the damage. Even though looking for Pokemon and scouting them and trying to figure out what the best one to do can be really, really tedious, it's actually one of my favorite parts, because what you'll find is that you'll end up on deep runs way more often, because the Pokemon that you're going to be running are going to be far, far better than the Pokemon that you would get if you just settle for something that's mediocre, that doesn't really have a good chance of winning, or maybe has no chance of winning. It's worth noting that sometimes in a seed you'll get nothing runnable that exists, and you just have to sort of YOLO it with a weak Pokemon to make the best out of a bad situation. But don't be scared to scout for rare Pokemon, and be patient waiting for a Pokemon at the right level, because all of those little small things, they really make a big difference when early on you are really, really low level relative to everything else, and you really need a little bit to catch up. You never ever know when something weird or unexpected can make a deep run, so as a result, if you're unsure of whether something is runnable or not, you can just err on the side of caution, run it, and then try and learn from that experience and say, okay, well, if I do, if I failed, why did I fail? Why was this Pokemon bad? Try and learn that for the future. As a side note, what constitutes a good Pokemon? I have an entire tier list that I've laid out of every single Pokemon. It is a long video. I'll link it in the description below if you're very interested in that. But very broadly, it's impossible to lay out what a good Pokemon is, even regardless of the actual Pokemon itself, right? They keep their base stats, they keep their types, but what is a good Pokemon? Well, typically it has a combination of good moves, preferably that cover a wide range of types, a spread that has some defensive capabilities and some offensive capabilities, and it should be a Pokemon with a decent typing, although Pokemon with not so great typings have won. I think an Aggron has won before, and should be a Pokemon with high enough base stat total to make it far. So I try and look for at least an 18 of an attack stat at level 8. So if it's a physical attacking Pokemon, it should have at least 18 attack. If it's special attacking Pokemon, it should have at least 18 special attack. Otherwise, it's not going to pack enough punch. Pokemon below 450 BST, they're really, really difficult to run due to not having the raw stats necessary. Typically, speed is an important thing, but slow Pokemon have done really well in the past. Pokemon can have lopsided defenses and do well. They can be physical or special or even mixed attackers and succeed. And so when looking for Pokemon, one key thing is that if a Pokemon has a good spread of stats, but not so great moves, well, as long as it's capable of learning moves, so it's not a stone Pokemon, well, then it might still be runnable if you think it's worth gambling on future moves, which it often is. But if a Pokemon has good moves and bad spread, well, then it can't win no matter what, because it's never going to be able to overcome the fact that its spread is bad, and at some point that's going to cost it. You should be spending all of your resources to get through Brock. Brock is the only fight besides the Elite Four for the entire run where your Pokemon are very, very, very frequently going to get walled. And so even though it's not fun to use full restores or big heals or elixirs or status heals or things like that, your risk of dying is so great that you should really err on the side of using all of those things early on, because right after Brock, the game gets a lot easier, and there's so many items and resources after Brock that you should use as much stuff as you get access to before Brock to just get through it. After Brock, immediately after Brock, the game gets much, 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 much easier and much less risky relative to that up until the Elite Four. You should be playing around common, low probability ways of losing past Brock. There are a lot of really subtle threats to your run that you should really aggressively play around. Here is a super important fact about Fire Red Leaf Green. If you clear every single trainer in Fire Red Leaf Green, on average, you're going to see each fully evolved Pokemon 4 times. And the odds of not seeing a fully evolved Pokemon because of that is pretty low, which means that you are very likely to see a Shedinja, and so you should carry a move that's going to cover Shedinja if you can. It's not always the case that you can play around all these threats, but if you can, that's something that you should keep in mind, is that you're very likely to run into one at some point in your run. Perish Song is always going to be a threat to end your run if your opponent has more than 3 Pokemon left, since you're not allowed to switch out, and it makes it impossible to kill all the Pokemon before your Perish timer is up. And the AI really likes using Perish Song, so you should be using your power points to kill Pokemon very, very aggressively when they have more than 3 Pokemon. After that, then you can use your power points a little bit less aggressively. You should always carry an excess of Pokeballs with you in case you run into a Pokemon that uses Destiny Bond after your move. And you should be healing your HP whenever it gets even slightly lower, slightly uncomfortable, to get into avoiding bad situations where you might get multiple bad Pokemon in a row. You might hit like a sandstorm in a situation where you're not immune to sand. You might get like countered and take a lot of damage. You might get like endeavored, right? There's a lot of bad things that can happen that can be avoided by just like centering really diligently. Counter and Mirror Coat are constant threats to end your run, so you have to be careful. And one way you can play around that is that if you have two moves that are physical, for example, and they won't outright kill a Pokemon, well, then you might want to pick the move that does less damage if they're both two shots, because the one that does less damage is going to do less damage to you in the case that you get countered, and if they're two shots, then it doesn't really matter anyways. But, that's a very small thing that you can do to mitigate a little bit of risk. Over the course of a long run, all of these little teeny bits of mitigation are going to add up, and that's going to amount to you losing a few less runs than you'd otherwise lose because you're going through so many battles. You should scout aggressively, and you should take really good notes. The Pokemon Tracker has gone through so many updates, and it's so incredible to use during a run to take notes. And regardless of whether you're running streaming or whether you're offline or whatever, the tracker is amazing. It runs really well. You should be using it to take notes about defenses, make personal notes about your Pokemon, anything like that. It's a wonderful resource. You should absolutely be using it. Even beyond that, though, when you're in a battle with Pokemon, if it's safe, i.e. you're not risk of being Destiny bonded, or you're not in a dungeon without too many heals, or your Pokemon's not too low, well, then you can actually scout it a little bit with your moves. If you have a contact move, you should be testing aggressively for contact abilities when it's safe to do so that way you can avoid them in the future when it's more dangerous. If you have physical and special moves, and you encounter something that walls you on one side, say it walls you on the physical side, well, even if your other stat is low, so say that it walls you on the physical side, even if your special attack stat is low, if you have a special attack, you should test the other side because it's very likely that your opponent's Pokemon rolled a really low special defense stat if it rolled a really high defense stat. I made an entire video about this that you can see the description about, but that concept applies that, okay, if a Pokemon is really bulky on one side, it's probably pretty squishy on the other one because of how randomness works. If you one-shot something with a super strong move, it might be worth testing a slightly less powerful move to see if it still one-shots to get an idea about its defensive stats. In the Elite Four, it's very likely that you will run into every Pokemon that you see at least once in your journey there. And by scouting, you might discover something scary, like a Pokemon that you really want to kill, or even a free Pokemon that you say, okay, well, this is not a threat to me. I can sit up on this as much as I want to. I can use heals on this Pokemon if I see it. Knowing the good Pokemon to set up on and knowing the Pokemon that you don't want to set up on, both of those are really, really important to have knowledge of in a run, and all of that helps you gain a little bit of percentage for the Elite Four, which all that percentage matters. As a quick reminder, don't commit the gambler's fallacy, right? Just because you see something 4 times on average, that doesn't mean you're going to see every Pokemon 4 times in every single run. You might see the same Pokemon 8 times. You might see other Pokemon 0 to 1 time, right? If you see that you have never seen a Shedinja in a run, it doesn't mean that you're more likely to see a Shedinja in the future, right? That's the gambler's fallacy. So every time you roll a Pokemon, it's the exact same odds. On average, you're likely to see a Shedinja in a run. But just because you don't see a Shedinja now, that doesn't mean that you're more likely to see a Shedinja in the future. In Fire Red Leaf Green, you should always be playing to full clear Silphco. Silphco is a dungeon that just has too much experience to leave on the table. You really want to get all that experience. Dungeons in Ironmon are kind of unique in that if you get into a bad situation, you might have to leave and miss out on some experience because you might have to leave some trainers behind. You can't re-enter dungeons. However, every level matters a lot. There's a huge difference between entering the Elite Four at level 87 and entering at level 90. If you can, snowball experience early, right? Full clear maps where you've entered dungeons, do all the really safe stuff first, and then try and do the risky stuff after that. Dungeons are very, very risky, and so in each dungeon besides Sylph, you should be clearing trainers when you can, but it's often not worth it to use big heals or power point restoring items in order to clear trainers, so for that reason, you really want to gravitate towards the safe stuff first and then do the risky stuff a little bit later. However, in Silphco, because there's so many trainers with so much experience on the table, I will plan on using elixirs and extra healing items there just to safely clear as much experience as possible. As a side note, one other thing that I've seen people do is clear gyms in a different order than you might be used to, right? So for example, in Blaine's gym, you can answer the questions in order to get to later trainers to clear trainers that have a high level Pokemon, right? Because you want to do the risky trainers that you're required to do at the very start, and then you want to do the safe trainers later when you have a better chance of healing, right? So in gyms, you can route that. In dungeons, you should be routing that when you feel like you need to clear everything, but in dungeons where you just want to clear as much as possible, you should be clearing safe stuff. One other thing that I'll do before Silphco to make it as likely as possible that I can clear everything in there is that I'll beat Blaine before going to Silphco. And that's because Blaine's badge gives a 10% invisible boost to special attack and special defense. So it helps special attackers by making it more likely you one-shot lower level Pokemon with bad moves, and it makes it so that you're a little bit bulkier because over the course of a long dungeon, taking 10% less damage from special moves, that's all going to really add up to make everything a lot safer. It's worth noting, by the way, that there are other badge boosts that exist as well that are really important to know about. Brock's gives 10% invisible attack, Surge's gives 10% invisible speed, and Koga's gives 10% invisible defense. Each of these boosts help tremendously, and they should be factored into your routing when making decisions. Surge's is particularly nice, and it's something that makes beating Surge for Rock Tunnel something you'll frequently want to do to get that badge boost and, be safe against Transform, for example, unless, you really need the items in Rock Tunnel, and past that, in which case, maybe you do Rock Tunnel first. Finally, my last and super important tip is that you should always be playing to win the game. I've been the champion fight in the Elite Four where I was confused, and I could heal the confusion, but I had no HP heals. And so what I decided is that I need to flip the confusion coin to decide the run. And the reason is that, well, if I heal the confusion, I get hit by this Pokemon that's dealing me a good amount of damage, and that puts my HP low enough that I'm at too much risk for the rest of the run. So I decided to just flip that coin instead because I thought it gave me the highest probability of winning the run. At times, you have to make those hard plays. You don't just play to get past the current Pokemon. You have to play to get to the end and win. And sometimes that means taking big risks in order to get a big reward in the future because there's a lot of RNG, there's a lot of risks that can happen. You can't and won't win Kaizo Ironmon every time, and it takes some luck, but by playing well and playing smart, you can make your odds as good as possible. If you play Kaizo Ironmon, you play it well, I think that you'll beat Kaizo Ironmon in no time. Let me know if you think there's any tips that I missed in the comments below, or anything that you've seen someone doing that I might have missed, anything that's giving them a huge advantage in a runs, or if you have any questions about the tips, I'm more than happy to expand on things in the comment below. I read all the comments that are posted. If you like the video, like below and subscribe. You can also ring the bell to get a notification when I post a new video.